Daniel Carter froze mid-step, his work boots crunching on broken glass as his flashlight beam caught the crimson stains across white silk. The wedding dress lay crumpled beside the dumpster like a fallen angel, its $50,000 Vera Wang label still attached, pearls scattered across the asphalt like tears. This wasn't supposed to be here. Not behind Mercy General Hospital at midnight, not torn and bloodied like evidence from a crime scene. A soft sob echoed from the shadows between two parked cars, followed by the sound of someone retching violently. Daniel's calloused hands trembled as he adjusted his grip on the flashlight. 20 years of plumbing emergencies never preparing him for this. Through the darkness, he glimpsed bare shoulders shaking against a car tire, designer heels abandoned, a young woman's voice whispering desperately into the night, "Please, God, don't let them find me." The hospital's emergency sirens wailed in the distance while his 7-year-old daughter Maya coughed through their trailer window 2 blocks away. What kind of nightmare had stumbled into his world? And why did every instinct tell him that walking away meant someone would die tonight? Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. Daniel Carter had learned to read trouble in 20 years of emergency plumbing calls, but nothing in his experience prepared him for the broken woman curled against the Honda Civic's rear tire. She looked up at his flashlight beam with eyes that had seen too much, mascara streaking down cheeks that belonged in magazines, not behind hospital dumpsters at midnight. "Ma'am, are you hurt?" His voice carried the careful gentleness he used with Maya when she woke from nightmares about her mother. The woman flinched anyway, pressing herself deeper into the shadows. She was younger than he'd first thought, maybe late 20s, with the kind of bone structure that spoke of good genetics and better nutrition. Her bare arms were unmarked except for a thin scratch along her collarbone, but the way she held herself suggested deeper wounds. The torn wedding dress told a story he wasn't sure he wanted to understand. "I don't need help," she whispered, then immediately contradicted herself by trying to stand and swaying dangerously. Daniel caught her elbow before she could fall, noting how her skin felt fevered despite the warm August night. "When's the last time you ate something?" He'd asked Maya the same question countless times, recognizing the hollow look of someone running on empty. She blinked at him as if the concept of food was foreign. Yesterday morning, I think. The caterer made those little sandwiches with the crusts cut off." Her laugh held no humor. $1,200 worth of finger foods I couldn't stomach. Daniel's monthly trailer payment was $800. He kept that observation to himself. "Look, I don't know what happened to you tonight, but you can't stay out here. It's not safe." He gestured toward the distant lights of the trailer park. "I've got a couch, some soup, and a phone if you need to call someone." "I can't call anyone." The words came out sharp, desperate. "He'll find me. They all will." "Who will?" She studied his face in the flashlight's glow, taking in his work-stained uniform, the exhaustion lines around his eyes, the wedding ring he still wore on a chain beneath his shirt 2 years after Sarah's funeral. Something in his expression must have convinced her because her shoulders dropped an inch. "My father, the man I was supposed to marry in 6 hours." She touched the torn fabric at her hip. "I jumped out of a moving car rather than go through with it." Daniel had attended enough domestic violence calls to recognize desperation. This woman wasn't running from poverty or addiction. She was fleeing from something money couldn't fix. Maybe something money had caused. 6 hours, he repeated, checking his watch. That makes it a wedding day, technically. For the first time, she almost smiled. "The worst wedding day ever. Come on, then. Let's get you somewhere safe before the groom sends out a search party." He offered his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, she took it. The walk to Daniel's trailer took 8 minutes through streets that transformed from medical district sterility to working-class reality. Sophia, she'd whispered her name somewhere between the hospital parking lot and Elm Street, moved like someone learning to use her legs again. Every car that passed made her tense. Every shadow seemed to hide threats. Daniel's home sat in Sunset Valley Mobile Home Park, a collection of single-wide and double-wide trailers arranged with the geometric precision of people making the best of limited space. His own unit, a faded blue 1998 model with white trim, occupied the corner lot beneath an ancient oak tree that had probably been there before the neighborhood existed. "It's not much," he said, fishing keys from his pocket, while noting how Sophia's gaze swept the neighboring units. Mrs. Martinez's trailer glowed with late-night television light. The Hendersons' place showed signs of their ongoing kitchen renovation. Normal people living normal lives, a concept that seemed foreign to the woman beside him. "It's perfect," she said, and something in her voice suggested she meant it. The interior reflected 7 years of single fatherhood and tight budgets. Furniture from 3 different decades occupied the living room. A brown leather recliner inherited from Daniel's father, a floral print couch Sarah had found at a garage sale, and a coffee table Maya had decorated with crayon masterpieces that Daniel couldn't bear to clean off. Children's books spilled from a milk crate bookshelf, and crayon drawings covered the refrigerator like colorful prayers. Sophia stopped at the refrigerator gallery, studying Maya's artwork with the intensity of someone visiting a museum. "She's talented," she said, tracing the outline of a stick figure family with careful fingers. "Is this you and her mother?" "Just me and Maya now." Daniel's voice carried the practiced neutrality of someone who'd answered this question too many times. "Sarah died 2 years ago. Car accident." The lie came automatically. The same version he'd told Maya, told the school, told anyone who asked. The truth, that Sarah had driven deliberately into the bridge support after leaving a note about not being able to be the mother Maya deserved, was a burden he carried alone. "I'm sorry." Sophia's response held genuine warmth, not the awkward pity he usually encountered. "Maya's lucky to have a father who keeps her artwork on display." "She's lucky to have a father who can't figure out how to get crayon off stainless steel," Daniel corrected, grateful for the lighter tone. "Are you hungry? I can make some eggs, maybe toast that's only slightly burned." "I don't want to impose." "You're not imposing. You're accepting hospitality, which is different." He moved toward the small galley kitchen, noting how Sophia remained frozen in the living room doorway. "You can sit down, you know. The couch won't bite." She perched on the edge of the cushions like someone ready to run at any moment. Daniel recognized the posture. Maya had sat the same way during her first weeks after Sarah's death, as if comfort was a luxury she couldn't afford. "Can I ask you something?" Sophia's voice was barely audible above the sound of eggs cracking into a bowl. "Shoot." "Why did you help me? You don't know anything about me. I could be dangerous." Daniel paused his whisking, considering the question seriously. "I guess because you looked like someone who needed help, and I'd hope someone would do the same for Maya if she ever found herself in trouble." He glanced back at her. "Are you? Dangerous, I mean?" "I don't think so. But I'm not sure I'm safe to be around either." From down the hallway came the sound of a small cough, followed by Maya calling out in her sleep. Both adults froze, listening, until the trailer settled back into silence. "That's Maya," Daniel said unnecessarily. "She's been fighting a cold." Morning arrived with the sound of small feet padding across linoleum and the smell of burnt coffee. Daniel had dozed fitfully in his recliner, unwilling to leave Sophia alone in the living room but too cautious to retreat to his bedroom. Every car that passed on Elm Street had made him tense. Every creak of the trailer settling had his attention. Sophia was already awake when Maya emerged from the hallway, her 7-year-old curiosity immediately fixated on the stranger curled beneath Daniel's old army blanket. Maya had inherited her mother's auburn curls and her father's steady gaze, and she used both to full effect as she studied their overnight guest. "Daddy?" Maya whispered, with the volume control of most children her age, which meant everyone in the trailer could hear perfectly. "There's a princess on our couch." "She's not a princess, sweetheart. She's a lady who needed a safe place to sleep." Daniel stretched the kinks from his neck, noting how Sophia had pulled the blanket up to her chin like armor. "This is Sophia. Sophia, this is Maya." "Are you running away from a dragon?" Maya asked with the directness that made Daniel simultaneously proud and mortified. "Because Daddy's really good at fixing things. He could probably fix your dragon problem too." Sophia's laugh was the first genuine sound of joy Daniel had heard from her. "Something like that. Your daddy did help me with my dragon problem, actually." "See?" Maya beamed at Daniel with the satisfaction of someone whose worldview had been validated. "Daddy's the best dragon fighter in Texas. He's also the best pancake maker, but only if you like them a little bit burned on the edges." "Maya, why don't you go brush your teeth while I make some breakfast?" Daniel suggested, recognizing the signs of his daughter warming up to full interrogation mode. "Can Sophia stay for breakfast? Please. We never have company except Mrs. Martinez, and she always complains about everything." Maya turned to Sophia with earnest 7-year-old diplomacy. "Do you complain about things? Because Daddy says complaining makes the food taste bad." "I promise not to complain," Sophia said solemnly. As Maya bounced toward the bathroom, Daniel caught Sophia's eye. "You don't have to stay for breakfast. I can drive you wherever you need to go." "Where would I go?" The question seemed to surprise her as much as it did him. "I don't have anywhere else to be right now." The admission hung in the air between them, loaded with implications Daniel wasn't sure he wanted to explore. He'd rescued plenty of people from flooded basements and broken water heaters, but he'd never rescued someone from their own life before. "Well then, pancakes it is." Fair warning, Maya wasn't exaggerating about the burned edges. The kitchen felt smaller with Sophia in it, her presence throwing off the familiar rhythm Daniel and Maya had developed over 2 years of morning routines. She moved carefully, as if afraid of taking up too much space, while Maya chattered about school and her friend Jessica's new hamster, and whether Sophia had ever seen a real castle. "I live in something like a castle," Sophia admitted, accepting a cup of coffee that was definitely too strong. "But it's not as nice as this place." "Our castle is small, but it's cozy," Maya announced with the wisdom of someone who'd learned early to find positives in limited circumstances. "Daddy says good things come in small packages. That's why I'm perfect size." Daniel nearly choked on his coffee. "That's not exactly what that saying means, kiddo." "It's what it means to me," Maya declared with finality that brooked no argument. Breakfast proceeded with the controlled chaos typical of any meal involving a 7-year-old and a kitchen barely big enough for 2 people. Maya insisted on helping, which meant flour on the floor and eggshells in the bowl. Sophia tried to help too, which resulted in her standing awkwardly in the middle of the kitchen, clearly having never participated in meal preparation that didn't involve staff. "I don't really know how to cook," she admitted when Daniel handed her a spatula. "Good thing we're just making pancakes then. Hard to mess up pancakes." He guided her hand to flip the first one, noting how she held the spatula like it might bite her. "See? Natural talent." The pancake landed half on the pan, half on the burner. Maya giggled. "That one looks like Texas." "Everything looks like Texas to you," Daniel said, but he was smiling. For the first time in months, his kitchen felt alive with something other than routine. Outside, a car slowed as it passed the trailer park. Daniel noticed Sophia tense, her attention shifting to the window. The car continued on, but the moment of peace was broken. "Sophia," Maya said, tugging on her borrowed t-shirt. "Are you going to stay with us forever?" The question Daniel had been avoiding crystallized in his daughter's innocent words. Forever was a luxury neither of them could afford to consider. The question of forever haunted the trailer for 3 days. Sophia slept on the couch, helped with breakfast dishes, and walked Maya to the school bus stop each morning while Daniel caught a few hours of sleep before his night shift. To anyone watching, they looked like a family finding their rhythm. The illusion was dangerous, and Daniel knew it. On Wednesday evening, Sophia announced she'd found a job at Sunrise Diner on South Lamar. The declaration came over a dinner of boxed macaroni and cheese that she'd somehow managed not to burn, though the noodles were definitely overcooked. "You don't have to work," Daniel said carefully, not wanting to sound patronizing. "I mean, you're welcome to stay here while you figure things out." "I need to contribute." Sophia's voice carried a determination that reminded him of Maya when she'd decided to tie her own shoes. "I can't just live off your kindness indefinitely." "Daddy says kindness isn't something you run out of," Maya piped up, twirling cheese around her fork with the concentration of a surgeon. "It's like love. The more you give, the more you have." Daniel felt heat creep up his neck. "Maya, eat your dinner." "It's true, though," Maya continued, unaware of the adult undercurrents swirling around the conversation. "Mrs. Martinez told me that. She said love is like a candle lighting another candle. You don't lose your flame when you share it." Sophia stared at Maya with an expression Daniel couldn't quite read. "Mrs. Martinez sounds very wise." "She is. She's also really old and knows everything about everything. She said you have sad eyes but a good heart." Maya paused in her cheese twirling to study Sophia seriously. "I don't think your eyes are sad anymore. They're more like hopeful sad. Like when Daddy watches old movies and cries, but also smiles." "Maya!" Daniel's warning carried more weight this time. "What?" "It's true. You do that thing where you cry and smile at the same time. Especially when you look at Mommy's picture." The silence that followed was broken by the sound of Mrs. Martinez's wind chimes from next door, a gentle reminder that life continued outside their small bubble of awkwardness. "I should probably meet Mrs. Martinez," Sophia said finally, "since she seems to know so much about me already." "She knows everything about everyone," Maya said cheerfully. "It's like her superpower. She can tell if you're lying just by looking at your face." Daniel made a mental note to have a conversation with his daughter about oversharing. After Maya went to bed, Daniel and Sophia found themselves in the living room with the careful distance of two people aware they were crossing invisible lines. The television played quietly in the background, some late-night comedy show that neither was really watching. "The diner job," Daniel said eventually. "You sure about that? It's hard work and the pay's not great." "I've never had a real job before." Sophia's admission came quietly. "Never earned my own money, never punched a time clock, never worried about being late because it would affect someone else's day." "I want to know what that feels like." "It feels like exhaustion mostly. Sore feet, difficult customers, managers who think they're running NASA instead of a restaurant. But it's yours, isn't it? The exhaustion, the sore feet, the difficult customers. You earned all of it." Daniel studied her face in the blue glow of the television. "You make it sound romantic. It's not. Neither is living in a gilded cage, but people romanticize that too." She pulled the army blanket tighter around her shoulders. "At least exhaustion is honest. What's dishonest about your old life?" The question slipped out before he could stop it, more personal than he'd intended to get. Sophia was quiet for so long he thought she might not answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Everything. Every conversation was scripted. Every relationship was strategic. Every emotion was calculated for maximum effect. I had lunch last month with a woman who's been my best friend for 15 years, and I realized I don't know anything real about her. Her favorite color, what makes her laugh when no one's watching, whether she's happy or just very good at pretending to be happy. And you? Were you happy or pretending? I didn't know there was a difference until I came here." She gestured around the small living room with its mismatched furniture and Maya's artwork. This is what happiness looks like, isn't it? It's messier than I expected. Daniel thought about Sarah's last few months, the way she'd smiled at Maya while dying inside, the careful performance of normalcy that had fooled everyone, including him. Happiness is messier than most people want to admit. Is that why you haven't been happy? Because it's too messy? The question hit him like cold water. What makes you think I'm not happy? Maya. Sophia's answer was simple, devastating. She's 7 years old, and she's trying to take care of you. Children that age should be worried about losing teeth and learning multiplication, not whether their father cries himself to sleep. She said that? She didn't have to. I recognized the look. Sophia shifted on the couch to face him more directly. I spent my childhood managing my father's emotions too. It's exhausting for a kid. Daniel felt something crack inside his chest, a fissure in the careful walls he'd built around his grief. I don't know how to be happy without Sarah. Maya deserves a father who isn't broken, but I don't know how to put the pieces back together. Maybe you don't put them back together the same way. Maybe you build something new with the pieces you have left. Before he could respond, Maya's voice called out from the bedroom. Daddy, I had a bad dream. Daniel started to get up, but Sophia was already moving. Can I? She asked. He nodded, watching as she disappeared down the narrow hallway. Through the thin walls, he could hear her gentle voice talking Maya through whatever nightmare had invaded her sleep. The sound of someone else comforting his daughter should have made him jealous, protective, territorial. Instead, it filled him with something he'd almost forgotten how to feel: relief. When Sophia returned 15 minutes later, she carried the kind of exhaustion that came from emotional labor, not physical work. She's worried about you, Sophia said, settling back onto the couch. She thinks if she's sick, you'll have to take care of her instead of being sad. That cough she's been fighting, she's making it sound worse than it is because she wants your attention focused on something other than missing her mother. The words hit him like a physical blow. She's manipulating her own illness? She's 7. She doesn't have the vocabulary to say, Daddy, I'm scared you're going to leave me like Mommy did, so I need you to worry about me instead of disappearing into your grief. So she coughs a little extra, complains about tummy aches that aren't quite real, makes herself small enough to fit into whatever emotional space you have available. Daniel buried his face in his hands. I'm screwing this up. I'm screwing her up. No, you're not. You're grieving, and she's trying to help the only way she knows how. But Daniel... Sophia's voice carried a weight he hadn't heard before. She needs you to be her father, not her patient. And you need to figure out how to live again, not just survive. The trailer felt smaller suddenly, filled with truths neither of them was quite ready to handle. Outside, a car slowed as it passed their street, engine rumbling in the quiet night. Both of them tensed until the sound faded into the distance. That job at the diner, Daniel said eventually. When do you start? Tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. shift. I'll drive you. It's not safe to walk alone in the dark. Daniel. Sophia's voice was gentle but firm. Eventually, I have to stop being your responsibility. Eventually, he agreed. But not tomorrow. In the blue light of the television, surrounded by the evidence of a life built from necessity rather than choice, they sat in comfortable silence. Neither spoke about the future, about the impossibility of their situation, or about the way her hand had somehow found its way to rest next to his on the couch cushion. Tomorrow would bring its own complications. Tonight, for just a few more hours, they could pretend that forever was still a possibility. Maya's cough turned vicious on Thursday night. What had been a persistent throat clearing for weeks suddenly became deep, rattling spasms that shook her small frame and left her gasping for breath. Daniel found her sitting up in bed at 2 a.m, eyes wide with the panic of someone who couldn't get enough air. Daddy, it hurts, she whispered between coughing fits, her voice hoarse and strained. Sophia appeared in the doorway before Daniel could call for her, already dressed and holding Maya's shoes. "We need to take her to the emergency room. It's just a cold," Daniel said. But even as the words left his mouth, he could hear how wrong they sounded. Maya's breathing was labored, each inhale a visible effort that made her thin shoulders rise and fall with exaggerated motion. "Daniel!" Sophia's voice cut through his denial with surgical precision. "Look at her lips." Maya's lips held the faint blue tinge that every parent fears and no parent wants to recognize. Daniel felt the world narrow to that single observation, everything else falling away except the immediate, primal need to fix what was wrong with his child. The drive to Dell Children's Medical Center took 12 minutes that felt like 12 hours. Maya dozed fitfully in Sophia's arms in the back seat, her breathing rapid and shallow. Every red light was an eternity, every slow driver a personal affront to Daniel's mounting panic. "She's going to be okay," Sophia murmured more to herself than to him. "Kids are resilient. She's going to be fine." Daniel gripped the steering wheel hard enough to leave marks, remembering another late-night drive to a different hospital, Sarah's slurred voice on the phone saying she was sorry, so sorry, that she couldn't be what Maya needed. That night had ended with a social worker and forms to fill out, and the terrible weight of being suddenly, completely alone with a 5-year-old who kept asking when Mommy was coming home. The emergency room at Dell Children's was designed to be cheerful despite its purpose. Bright colors and cartoon characters on the walls, toys scattered in the waiting area, staff trained to speak in gentle voices that never quite masked the underlying urgency of their work. Maya perked up slightly in the warm, well-lit space, her breathing still labored, but her eyes taking in the murals of friendly dinosaurs and rainbow bridges. Maya Carter, a nurse in scrubs decorated with dancing bears, approached with a wheelchair. "Let's get you somewhere more comfortable, sweetheart." The triage process was efficiently terrifying. Temperature, blood pressure, oxygen saturation levels that made the nurse frown and tap her tablet screen. Questions about symptoms, duration, family history of respiratory issues. Daniel answered what he could while watching Sophia hold Maya's hand through each procedure, her presence somehow making everything feel less catastrophic. "Has she been exposed to anyone with pneumonia recently?" the nurse asked, attaching a pulse oximeter to Maya's finger. "Pneumonia?" Daniel felt the word like a physical blow. "We thought it was just a cold." Kids can go from cold to pneumonia pretty quickly, especially if they're not getting enough rest or if their immune systems are compromised by stress. The nurse's tone was professional but kind. "The good news is we caught it early. The concerning news is her oxygen saturation is lower than we'd like to see." They were moved to a treatment room where Maya looked impossibly small against the adult-sized bed, monitors beeping steadily around her like electronic lullabies. A young doctor with kind eyes and efficient hands introduced herself as Dr. Kim and began the process of confirming what everyone already suspected. "Pneumonia, moderate severity," she announced after reviewing chest x-rays that showed Maya's lungs clouded with infection. "She'll need to be admitted for IV antibiotics and respiratory support, probably looking at 3 to 5 days, depending on how she responds to treatment." 3 to 5 days? Daniel's voice cracked on the numbers. "In the hospital? I know it sounds scary, but pneumonia in children is very treatable when we catch it this early. She's going to be fine, Mr. Carter. Kids are amazingly resilient." The financial reality hit him like cold water 30 minutes later, when the admissions clerk appeared with forms and estimates. His insurance through the city would cover 60% of the costs, but 60% of a multi-day hospital stay still left numbers that made his head spin. "The estimated out-of-pocket cost will be approximately $15,000, the clerk said with the practiced neutrality of someone who delivered devastating financial news multiple times per day. "We'll need a deposit of $5,000 to begin treatment." Daniel stared at the paperwork, the numbers swimming in front of his eyes. $5,000. He had $843 in his checking account and maybe another $200 in savings. His credit cards were maxed from Sarah's funeral expenses 2 years ago. "I don't have $5,000, he said quietly, the admission burning his throat like acid. "We have payment plan options," the clerk began, but Daniel was already shaking his head. "You don't understand. I don't have $5,000 total. I have less than $1,000 to my name." The silence that followed was broken by Maya's cough from the treatment room, a sound that seemed to mock every choice Daniel had ever made, every corner he'd cut, every bill he'd prioritized over building an emergency fund. "There are charity programs," the clerk said gently, "financial hardship applications. But they take time to process, and we do need some form of deposit to admit her tonight." Sophia had been quietly listening to the conversation from her position near Maya's bed. Now she stood and walked to the clerk's desk with the kind of purposeful movement that suggested decision-making Daniel recognized but didn't understand. "Put it on this card," she said, producing a black credit card from her wallet. "Sophia, no." Daniel's protest came automatically, pride warring with desperation in his chest. "The full amount," Sophia continued, ignoring him. "Whatever isn't covered by insurance, I want to cover it." "Ma'am, this could be a significant amount of money," the clerk warned. "I understand." Sophia's voice carried a finality that brooked no argument. The transaction was approved in seconds, and suddenly Maya's treatment was secured, her future assured by the swipe of a piece of plastic Daniel couldn't have qualified for if he'd tried for a decade. "We can discuss this later," Sophia said when Daniel opened his mouth to protest again. "Right now, the only thing that matters is Maya getting better." But Daniel knew there would be no discussing it later, no way to repay what she'd just done, no mathematics that could balance the equation between his pride and his daughter's life. The weight of obligation settled on his shoulders like lead, heavier than any debt he'd ever carried. Maya was transferred to a pediatric room on the 4th floor, a space designed to be as unhospital-like as possible. The walls were painted with a forest scene complete with friendly woodland creatures, and the bed could be adjusted to look more like a couch than medical equipment. Maya brightened considerably at the sight of the flat-screen TV and the promise of unlimited chocolate pudding. "This isn't so bad, Daddy," she said, her breathing already easier thanks to the nebulizer treatment. "It's like a hotel, but with better snacks." Daniel forced a smile and squeezed her hand. "Just focus on getting better, kiddo. Everything else will work itself out." But as he watched Sophia help Maya choose a movie on the hospital's entertainment system, he wondered how anything would ever work out again. The woman who'd appeared in his life as a refugee from wealth had just casually spent more money than he made in 6 months. The distance between their worlds had never been more apparent or more insurmountable. "Mr. Carter?" Dr. Kim appeared in the doorway with a tablet in her hands. "Maya's responding well to the initial treatment. Her oxygen levels are already improving, which is exactly what we want to see. She's going to be fine." Relief flooded through him so powerfully he had to sit down. "Thank you. Thank you so much. She'll need to stay for monitoring, but I'm optimistic we're looking at the shorter end of the recovery timeline. 3 days, maybe 4 at most." As Dr. Kim left, Daniel found himself alone with the 2 most important females in his world, one who depended on him completely and one who had just saved them both in a way he could never reciprocate. "Sophia," he began, not sure how to finish the sentence. "Don't," she said quietly, not taking her eyes off Maya, who was dozing fitfully against the pile of hospital pillows. "Please don't thank me, and don't apologize, and don't try to figure out how to pay me back. Just let me do this one thing. This one thing is $15,000. This one thing is making sure Maya gets better." Her voice carried a fierceness he hadn't heard before. "Money is it's just a tool, and right now, it's the right tool for the right job." Daniel watched his daughter sleep, monitors beeping steadily around her, and tried to reconcile the gratitude in his chest with the knowledge that accepting this help changed everything between him and Sophia. The careful balance they'd found in the trailer, the possibility that they might be equals building something together, had been destroyed by medical bills and the brutal mathematics of American healthcare. Outside Maya's window, Austin glittered in the distance, a city full of people sleeping peacefully in their beds, while his daughter fought off infection with the help of IV antibiotics he couldn't afford. The gap between Sophia's world and his had always existed, but now it yawned between them like a chasm too wide to bridge. The irony wasn't lost on him that the woman who'd run from wealth to find authenticity had just used that same wealth to save the thing he valued most in the world. The very thing she'd been trying to escape had become the thing that made their relationship possible. And impossible, all at the same time. Maya's recovery became the eye of a storm Daniel couldn't see coming. By Saturday morning, her breathing had improved dramatically, the antibiotics working their quiet magic through her small system. She sat propped up in the hospital bed, coloring a picture of the three of them, Daniel, herself, and Sophia, standing in front of their trailer with exaggerated smiles and a sun that took up half the page. "Look, Daddy." Maya held up the drawing with pride. "It's our family." The word hit Daniel like a physical blow. Family. He glanced at Sophia, who was pretending to read a magazine while Maya colored, but he could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she gripped the pages too tightly. "That's beautiful, kiddo," he managed, accepting the drawing with hands that trembled slightly. "Should we put it on the refrigerator when we get home?" "Yes." "Right next to the picture of Mommy so she can see our new family too." The silence that followed was broken by Dr. Kim's arrival with discharge papers and a smile that suggested good news. Maya's responding beautifully to treatment. Her oxygen levels are back to normal, and the chest X-ray from this morning shows significant improvement. I'm comfortable sending her home tomorrow with oral antibiotics and a follow-up appointment in a week. Relief should have flooded through Daniel, but instead he felt a tightening in his chest. Home. The word carried implications he wasn't ready to examine. "That's wonderful news," Sophia said, her voice carefully neutral. After Dr. Kim left, Maya dozed off with her coloring book spread across her lap. Daniel found himself alone with Sophia in the artificial quiet of the hospital room, machines humming softly around them like electronic prayers. "We need to talk," he said quietly. "I know." They moved to the family lounge at the end of the hall, a space designed to provide privacy for difficult conversations. Through the windows, Austin sprawled in the afternoon heat, the city carrying on its business while their small world shifted on its axis. $15,000, Daniel said without preamble. "It's not about the money. Everything is about money when you don't have it." His voice carried the weight of years spent calculating grocery budgets and choosing between electricity bills and car repairs. "You just spent more money than I make in 6 months. More money than I've ever had at one time in my entire life." Sophia stared out the window at the traffic below. "I've never not had money. I don't know what it feels like to choose between paying for medicine and paying rent. I can't imagine watching your child suffer because you can't afford to help her. But you can imagine it now, can't you? Because you've been living with us. You've seen how we count every dollar, how we make do with broken things because replacement isn't an option." Daniel leaned forward in his chair, forcing her to meet his eyes. "You saved Maya's life, and I will be grateful for that until the day I die. But you also just reminded me exactly how different our worlds are. Our worlds don't have to be different. They are different. They've always been different. I was just pretending otherwise because—" He stopped himself before the words could escape. "Because what?" "Because I was falling in love with you." The admission came out raw, unpolished, like everything else in his life. "Because for 3 weeks, I let myself believe that maybe we could build something real together. That maybe Maya could have a mother who chose to be here instead of someone who felt trapped by being here. Sophia flinched as if he'd struck her. I'm not trapped. Aren't you? You ran away from one life you didn't choose and landed in another life you can't afford to keep. What happens when your father finds you, when your real world comes calling? You think you're going to choose our double-wide trailer over whatever empire he's built for you? I already chose. Her voice rose slightly, drawing glances from other families in the lounge. I chose the moment I climbed out of that limousine. I chose when I walked away from that wedding. I chose when I paid Maya's hospital bills. You chose with his money? The words hung between them like a blade. Sophia's face went pale, then flushed with anger or embarrassment. Daniel couldn't tell which. That's not fair. Life isn't fair. If life was fair, Maya's mother wouldn't have killed herself because she couldn't afford mental health treatment. If life was fair, I wouldn't be sitting in this hospital room trying to figure out how to accept charity from a woman I love who could buy and sell my entire existence without checking her bank balance. It's not charity. Sophia's voice was barely above a whisper. And it's not his money. It's mine. I have a trust fund, accounts in my own name. Money that belongs to me, not him. Money he put there. Money that comes from his world, whether it's technically yours or not. Daniel scrubbed his face with both hands, exhaustion and gratitude and resentment swirling together in his chest like emotional poison. I don't know how to be with someone who can solve all our problems with a credit card swipe. What do I bring to this relationship? What do I offer you that you can't buy? You offer me a life that matters. Tears were streaming down Sophia's face now, unchecked and desperate. You offer me a daughter who draws pictures of our family. You offer me mornings where I burn breakfast and you eat it anyway. You offer me a chance to be someone who earns what she has instead of someone who just spends what she was given. And what happens when that novelty wears off? When the charm of struggling for every dollar gets old? When Maya gets sick again and we can't afford the medicine, and you have to watch her suffer because I'm too proud to take your money? Then I'll take your money. The response came so quickly it startled them both. I'll work at the diner and save every penny and contribute to our family however I can. I'll earn my place here instead of buying it. On $7.25 an hour plus tips? On whatever I can earn honestly. Daniel looked at her, really looked at her, and saw something he hadn't noticed before. Determination. The kind of steel-backed resolve that had probably helped her jump out of a moving limousine rather than marry a man she didn't love. The kind of courage that had let her walk away from billions of dollars to sleep on a stranger's couch. Your father's going to find you eventually, he said quietly. I know. He's going to try to take you back to your old life. I know. And if he can't convince you to go willingly, he's going to try to destroy me, my job, my reputation, my custody of Maya. He's going to use every weapon in his arsenal to prove I'm not good enough for you. I know. Sophia wiped her face with the back of her hand, leaving streaks of mascara across her cheeks. Are you willing to fight for this? For us? Through the lounge windows, Daniel could see Maya's room, could make out the small shape of his daughter sleeping peacefully in a bed he couldn't have afforded to put her in. The woman sitting across from him had saved his child's life with money that meant nothing to her but everything to him. The mathematics of love had never been more complicated. Yeah, he said finally. I'm willing to fight. The storm arrived on Tuesday, 48 hours after Maya came home from the hospital. Daniel was under the kitchen sink, wrestling with a stubborn pipe joint that had chosen the worst possible moment to start leaking when he heard the sound that had haunted his nightmares for 3 weeks, expensive car engines idling outside his trailer. Maya was at the kitchen table, working on a get-well card for herself that featured their stick-figure family and increasingly elaborate scenarios. The latest version showed them all holding hands in front of a castle that looked suspiciously like a trailer with turrets drawn in purple crayon. Sophia stood at the stove stirring a pot of soup that actually smelled edible, her hair pulled back in a ponytail that made her look younger, more vulnerable. The domestic tranquility shattered when Maya looked out the window and gasped, "Daddy, there are big black cars outside." Like in the movies when someone important dies. Daniel felt ice water flood his veins. He crawled out from under the sink, his work shirt soaked with dirty water and his hands covered in pipe grease, to see 3 black SUVs arranged in a formation that suggested military precision rather than casual visit. "Sophia." His voice came out hoarse. She was already moving toward the window, her face draining of color as she took in the scene. "He found me." The knock on the door came 30 seconds later. Not the polite tap of a neighbor or the casual rap of a friend, but the authoritative bang of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. Daniel opened the door to find himself face to face with a man who radiated power the way Maya's space heater radiated warmth, constant, overwhelming, and impossible to ignore. Richard Wellington was shorter than Daniel had expected, maybe 5'9" in expensive Italian shoes, but he carried himself with the bearing of someone who could buy small countries if the mood struck him. "Mr. Carter." The voice was cultured, cold, and completely certain of its own authority. "I believe you have something that belongs to me." "Daddy, who is that?" Maya's voice carried from the kitchen, curious rather than afraid. "Stay inside, kiddo," Daniel called back, not taking his eyes off the man who had somehow made the trailer park feel smaller just by standing in it. Richard Wellington stepped past Daniel without invitation, his gaze sweeping the interior of the trailer with the clinical assessment of someone evaluating real estate for demolition. 2 men in dark suits followed him, positioning themselves near the door with the casual alertness of professional security. "Sophia." Richard's voice softened marginally when he spotted his daughter frozen near the stove. "It's time to come home." "I am home." The words came out steady, but Daniel could see her hands shaking as she turned off the burner under the soup pot. "This?" Richard gestured around the small living space with obvious distaste. "This is not a home. This is where people come when they've given up on having a real life." "Hey!" Daniel stepped forward, his own anger overriding his intimidation. "You're in my house. You want to insult my life, you can do it from the street." Richard turned his attention to Daniel with the slow, predatory focus of a shark noticing blood in the water. "Your house." "Yes, let's discuss your house, Mr. Carter. 1,200 square feet of manufactured housing on a lot you don't own, monthly rent of $800 you can barely afford. Your credit score is 547. You have outstanding medical debt from your late wife's psychiatric treatment, and as of last week, you have additional medical debt from your daughter's hospital stay that would take you approximately 15 years to pay off at your current income level." Each fact hit Daniel like a physical blow, the casual violation of his privacy more humiliating than any punch to the gut. "You had me investigated. I had you researched. There's a difference." Richard's smile held no warmth. "Research is thorough. Investigation implies you were worth the effort." "Dad, stop!" Sophia moved to stand between them, her chin raised in defiance that reminded Daniel of Maya when she was determined to prove a point. "You don't get to come into their home and—" "Their home?" Richard's laugh was sharp as broken glass. "Sophia, darling, you've been playing house for 3 weeks. It's time to return to reality." Maya chose that moment to emerge from the kitchen, drawn by the sound of raised voices and the presence of strangers in her living room. She took in the scene with the rapid assessment skills of a child who had learned early to read adult emotional weather patterns. "Are you Sophia's daddy?" she asked Richard, with the directness that made Daniel simultaneously proud and terrified. Richard's expression shifted as he looked down at Maya, something almost human flickering across his features before the cold mask reasserted itself. "I am. She talks about you sometimes," Maya continued, apparently unaware of the tension crackling through the room. "She says you used to read her stories when she was little like me." "Yes, well," Richard cleared his throat uncomfortably. "That was a long time ago. Daddy still reads me stories every night. Even when he's really tired from work." Maya looked between Richard and Daniel with the innocent wisdom of childhood. "Do you still read Sophia stories?" The question hung in the air like a challenge, highlighting the distance between the man Richard had been and the man he'd become. Daniel watched emotions flicker across the older man's face. Pain, regret, something that might have been longing, before the corporate mask slammed back into place. "Sophia doesn't need bedtime stories anymore," Richard said finally. "She needs to come home and fulfill her responsibilities." "What responsibilities?" Sophia's voice rose with each word. "Marrying Marcus? Producing heirs for the Wellington Empire? Sitting quietly while you run my life like one of your real estate developments? I am trying to protect you. You're trying to control me. There's a difference." Sophia moved closer to Daniel, and he felt the warmth of her presence against his arm. "I don't need your protection anymore." Richard's gaze shifted between his daughter and Daniel, calculation replacing paternal concern. "And you think he can protect you? A man who can't even protect his own child from pneumonia without charity from strangers?" The words hit their target with devastating accuracy. Daniel felt shame flood through him, the familiar weight of inadequacy pressing down on his shoulders like a physical burden. "That's enough." Sophia's voice cracked like a whip. "You want to destroy him to get to me? Fine. But leave Maya out of it." "Maya." Richard turned his attention back to the 7-year-old, his tone shifting to something approximating grandfatherly warmth. "Do you like living here? In this small space?" Maya considered the question with the seriousness she brought to all important matters. "I like living with Daddy and Sophia. They take care of me. But wouldn't you like to live somewhere bigger? With a swimming pool and a big yard and all the toys you could ever want?" Daniel felt his heart stop. The offer was subtle but clear. Richard Wellington was prepared to buy his daughter's affection to get his own daughter back. "I already have all the toys I want," Maya said simply, "and I don't know how to swim anyway. Daddy was going to teach me this summer at the community center, but then Mommy died and we got too sad to go swimming." The casual mention of Sarah's death seemed to hit Richard like cold water. He stared at Maya with something approaching recognition, as if he was seeing her for the first time as a real child rather than a pawn in his chess game with Sophia. "Your mommy died?" he asked, his voice softer than Daniel had heard it. 2 years ago, she was really sad inside her head, and the sadness made her sick until she couldn't get better." Maya's explanation was matter-of-fact in the way children accept tragedy they don't fully understand. "But Daddy takes really good care of me, and now Sophia helps too. We're a family." Richard was quiet for a long moment, staring at Maya with an expression Daniel couldn't read. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight that hadn't been there before. "Families are complicated, little one." "Not really," Maya said with the confidence of someone who had figured out life's essential truths. "Families are just people who love each other and don't give up, even when things get hard." The silence that followed was broken by the sound of Mrs. Martinez's wind chimes from next door, a gentle reminder that the world continued to turn outside their small trailer, oblivious to the drama playing out in Daniel's living room. Richard straightened. the corporate mask sliding back into place like armor. "Sophia, you have 24 hours to say goodbye to your friends. After that, I'm afraid Mr. Carter may find his current employment situation somewhat unstable." The threat was delivered with surgical precision, polite and devastating. Daniel felt the ground shift beneath his feet, the careful stability he'd built for Maya crumbling under the weight of forces beyond his control. "You can't do that," Daniel said. But even as the words left his mouth, he knew they weren't true. "I can do anything I want, Mr. Carter. That's what money means in this country. The freedom to reshape reality according to your preferences." Richard moved toward the door, his security detail falling into formation around him. "Sophia, I'll expect you at the house tomorrow evening. Don't make me come back here." As the entourage prepared to leave, Richard paused at the threshold and looked back at Maya, who was still standing in the middle of the living room with her get-well card clutched in her small hands. "Take care of yourself, little one," he said quietly. "You too, Mr. Wellington," Maya replied with the politeness Daniel had taught her. "I hope you and Sophia stop being mad at each other soon. Being mad makes you tired." Richard's face went through another series of complicated emotions before settling on something that might have been respect. "You're very wise for someone so young." "Daddy says I get that from my mommy." The mention of Sarah seemed to hit Richard like another physical blow. He stared at Maya for a moment longer, then walked out into the Austin afternoon without another word. Through the window, Daniel watched the convoy of SUVs disappear down Elm Street, leaving behind only the lingering scent of expensive cologne and the crushing weight of inevitability. "Sophia," he began, not sure how to finish the sentence. "I know." She was crying again, silent tears that spoke to a depth of pain he was only beginning to understand. "I'm so sorry, Daniel." "I'm so sorry I brought this into your life. Don't apologize for being who you are. I'm apologizing for what he is." She wiped her face with the back of her hand, leaving streaks of mascara across her cheeks. "For what he's capable of doing to people who get in his way." Maya, who had been listening to the adult conversation with the intense focus she brought to everything important, walked over to Sophia and took her hand. "It's okay," she said, with the simple wisdom that sometimes emerged from childhood like unexpected gifts. "Daddies get scared sometimes, too. But love is stronger than scared. Mommy told me that before she went to heaven." Standing in his small living room, surrounded by the evidence of a life built from necessity rather than choice, Daniel felt the future shifting around them like weather patterns he couldn't control. The storm had arrived, and there was nowhere left to run. The 24 hours that followed Richard Wellington's ultimatum passed like a fever dream, each moment stretching and contracting with the elastic quality of time under extreme stress. Daniel called in sick to work for the first time in 2 years, unable to focus on fixing other people's problems when his own world was disintegrating. He spent Wednesday morning making phone calls to his supervisor, explaining the situation in vague terms, to Maya's school, arranging for her to stay with Mrs. Martinez if necessary, to the few family members scattered across Texas who might be able to help with temporary housing if everything fell apart. Each conversation felt like preparing for a natural disaster that hadn't arrived yet but was visible on the horizon, dark and inevitable. Sophia moved through the trailer like a ghost, helping Maya with her homework, folding laundry with mechanical precision, cooking meals that none of them had appetite to eat. The forced normalcy was more unsettling than panic would have been. "Are you going back to your daddy?" Maya asked Wednesday evening as Sophia tucked her into bed. The question was delivered with the careful neutrality of a child who had learned that adult decisions were often beyond her influence but never beyond her concern. "I don't know, sweetheart." Sophia's voice was steady, but Daniel could see her hands trembling as she smoothed Maya's blankets. "What would you want me to do?" Maya considered the question with the gravity she brought to all important matters. I want you to stay. But Daddy says, sometimes we have to do things we don't want to do because they're the right thing. And what do you think the right thing is? I think the right thing is for families to stay together. Maya's response was immediate, certain. But I also think the right thing is for people not to be sad all the time. Your daddy seems really sad. The observation hit Sophia like cold water. How can you tell? His eyes. They're like Daddy's eyes were after Mommy died, like there's a big hurt inside that's too big to fix. Maya reached up to touch Sophia's cheek with the gentle concern of someone far too young to be dispensing wisdom about grief. Maybe if you go back, his eyes won't hurt so much. That night, Daniel found Sophia sitting on the trailer's small front steps, staring at the stars, barely visible through Austin's light pollution. The warm September air carried the sound of distant traffic and Mrs. Martinez's television through thin walls. "She's right, isn't she?" Sophia said without looking at him. "About my father's eyes." Daniel settled beside her on the narrow step, their shoulders touching in the cramped space. "Grief looks different on different people, but yeah, there's something there. I never thought of him as grieving. He was just controlling, demanding. Always trying to manage my life like one of his business projects." Sophia pulled her knees to her chest, making herself smaller. "But Maya sees things adults miss, doesn't she? Kids are good at reading pain. They have to be. Their survival depends on understanding the emotional weather around them." Daniel thought of Maya's hypervigilance after Sarah's death, the way she'd monitored his moods like a tiny meteorologist tracking storm systems. "What happened to your mother?" "She died when I was Maya's age. Cancer." Sophia's voice carried the flat effect of someone reciting facts rather than sharing memories. "I remember being in hospitals a lot. Waiting rooms with uncomfortable chairs and magazines I was too young to read. Dad wearing the same suit for days because he wouldn't leave her side. That doesn't sound like the man I met yesterday. He wasn't that man yesterday. He became someone else after she died. Someone harder, more focused on control than connection." Sophia wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I think he decided that if he could control everything, my education, my friends, my future, then nothing bad could happen to me. But something bad did happen. You grew up without a father who knew how to love you without trying to own you." The words hung between them like a diagnosis, accurate and painful. "He never remarried," Sophia continued as if Daniel hadn't spoken. "Never even dated, as far as I know. Just threw himself into building his empire and making sure I was protected from every possible threat, including the threat of making my own choices. And now you're making the biggest choice of your life. Am I?" She turned to look at him, her eyes reflecting the streetlight like pools of uncertainty. "Or am I just letting him force me into another decision I don't really want to make?" Daniel felt the weight of her question, the impossible mathematics of love and sacrifice and competing loyalties. "What do you want, Sophia? Not what your father wants, not what you think I want, not what Maya needs. What do you want?" "I want to stay." The answer came immediately, certain as sunrise. "I want to wake up in your too-small bed and burn breakfast while Maya draws pictures of our family. I want to work at the diner and come home exhausted and proud of every dollar I earned. I want to fight about whose turn it is to take out the trash and worry about Maya's grades and save up for a vacation we'll never be able to afford but plan anyway. But I want you to have a job tomorrow. I want Maya to be able to stay in her school with her friends. I want Mrs. Martinez to keep living in the trailer next door instead of having to find somewhere else because the whole park gets sold to developers who decide it's not profitable enough." Sophia's voice broke on the last words. "I want my love for you to make your life better, not destroy everything you've worked for." Daniel pulled her against his side, feeling the way she fit perfectly in the space between his arm and his ribs. What if we fought him? What if we called his bluff? It's not a bluff. You don't understand the kind of power he has, the connections. He could have you blacklisted from every plumbing company in Texas. He could have this park condemned for code violations that suddenly appear overnight. He could make Maya's life so unstable that Child Protective Services starts asking questions about whether you're fit to parent her. You think he'd really do all that? I think he'd do whatever it takes to protect me from what he sees as a threat to my well-being. And right now, that's you. She turned in his arms to face him directly. The terrible thing is, he thinks he's doing it out of love. Maybe he is. The admission surprised them both. Daniel felt the truth of it settle in his chest like a stone. Richard Wellington wasn't evil, just broken in ways that made his love toxic rather than nurturing. That doesn't make it right, Sophia said. No, but it makes it sadder. They sat in silence, listening to the night sounds of the trailer park around them. Mrs. Martinez's dog barked at something in the distance. A car drove slowly through the narrow streets, probably someone coming home from a late shift. Normal sounds of normal lives continuing their normal patterns while their world prepared to end. There's something else, Sophia said eventually. Something I haven't told you about Marcus. Daniel felt his stomach drop. The man you were supposed to marry. He's not just demanding the wedding for romantic reasons. He's in debt, gambling, bad investments. He needs the Wellington connection to save his own family's business empire. Sophia's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. If I don't marry him, his company collapses. Thousands of people lose their jobs. That's not your responsibility. Isn't it? If I have the power to prevent thousands of families from losing their income, don't I have an obligation to use that power? Daniel stared at her, understanding finally dawning. The weight she carried wasn't just about her own freedom or her father's control. It was about the ripple effects of wealth and power, and the way individual choices could devastate entire communities. You're thinking about going back, he said. It wasn't a question. I'm thinking about a lot of things. She leaned her head against his shoulder, and he could feel the exhaustion radiating from her like heat. I'm thinking about Maya drawing pictures of our family. I'm thinking about your job and her school and Mrs. Martinez's trailer. I'm thinking about thousands of people I've never met who might lose everything because I want to be happy. Happiness isn't selfish, Sophia. It is when it comes at other people's expense. And what about the expense to you, to us, to Maya, who's already planning which bedroom will be yours when we find a bigger place? Daniel felt anger building in his chest, not at Sophia, but at the impossible situation her father had created. What about the cost of sacrificing your own life for other people's security? Maybe that's what love is. Maybe it's choosing other people's well-being over your own happiness. That's not love. That's martyrdom. And martyrs make terrible mothers. The words hit their target with surgical precision. Sophia pulled back to stare at him, hurt and recognition warring in her expression. Maya needs someone who fights for their own happiness, Daniel continued, pressing his advantage. Someone who shows her that she's worth fighting for, worth choosing, worth keeping. If you sacrifice yourself for some abstract greater good, what does that teach her about her own worth? It teaches her that sometimes we have to make hard choices. It teaches her that the people she loves will always find reasons to leave. The truth hung between them like a blade, sharp and inescapable. Sophia covered her face with her hands, and Daniel could see her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. I don't know how to choose, she whispered through her fingers. I don't know how to weigh your happiness against thousands of strangers' livelihoods. I don't know how to balance Maya's need for stability against my father's need to protect me from what he thinks will hurt me." "Then don't choose," Daniel said quietly. "What?" "Don't choose. At least, not yet." He pulled her hands away from her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. "Give me 24 hours. Let me try something before you decide to sacrifice yourself for everyone else's peace of mind." "Daniel, what are you going to do?" "I'm going to talk to your father." Sophia's face went white. "You can't. He'll destroy you." "Maybe. Or maybe he'll listen to another father who understands what it's like to lose someone you love." Daniel stood, helping her to her feet. "Maybe he'll recognize that trying to control someone you love is just another way of losing them. And if you're wrong, if he uses the meeting as an excuse to follow through on his threats, then at least I'll go down fighting for something that matters." Daniel cupped her face in his hands, thumbs brushing away tears that seemed endless. "I'm not going to let fear make my decisions anymore. I lost too many years with Sarah because I was afraid to push her to get help, afraid to rock the boat, afraid to demand better for all of us. I won't make that mistake again. This is different. This is dangerous. Everything worth having is dangerous." He kissed her forehead, tasting salt and desperation and the faint scent of the shampoo she'd started using since moving in with them. "Go pack a bag, just in case. But don't say goodbye to Maya yet. Let me try to find another way first. Daniel, trust me, one more day. Can you give me that?" Sophia searched his face in the dim light from the street lamp, looking for something. Reassurance, maybe, or certainty, or signs that he understood what he was asking of her. Finally, she nodded. "One more day." As they walked back into the trailer, Daniel felt the weight of the promise settle on his shoulders like a yoke. He had 24 hours to convince a billionaire to change his mind, to find a solution that saved everyone without destroying anyone, to prove that love could triumph over fear and control and the terrible mathematics of power. Through Maya's bedroom door, he could hear his daughter talking to herself as she fell asleep, practicing the bedtime story she'd been working on about a princess who found her family in a magical trailer park where everyone helped everyone else and nobody ever had to leave. 24 hours to make that fairy tale come true. 24 hours to save them all. Daniel Carter had never been inside a building where the elevator required a key card to reach the top floor. But at 8:30 Thursday morning, he found himself rising through 43 stories of Austin's most expensive real estate with the stomach-dropping sensation of ascending toward his own execution. Wellington Tower occupied an entire city block downtown, its glass and steel facade reflecting the morning sun like a monument to accumulated power. The lobby alone was larger than Daniel's entire trailer, all marble and modern art, and the kind of aggressive luxury that made visitors feel small by design. Richard Wellington's executive assistant, a woman in her 30s who probably earned more than Daniel made in 2 years, had seemed genuinely surprised when he'd called requesting a meeting. The surprise had deepened when he'd mentioned Helena Wellington by name, a detail that apparently carried enough weight to get him an appointment within 12 hours. Now, standing in the hallway outside Wellington's office, Daniel felt the full weight of what he was attempting. He wore his only suit, a charcoal gray number he'd bought for Sarah's funeral and hadn't touched since. His shoes were polished but old, his tie borrowed from Mrs. Martinez's late husband, and his hands, no matter how much scrubbing, still carried the permanent stains of 20 years in the plumbing trade. The office door was mahogany and brass, solid as a bank vault and twice as intimidating. When it opened, Daniel found himself face to face with a man who looked like he'd aged a decade since Tuesday's confrontation in the trailer park. Richard Wellington's expensive suit couldn't hide the exhaustion in his eyes, the way his shoulders carried invisible weight. He looked like a man who hadn't slept well in years, maybe decades. "Mr. Carter." The greeting was neutral, neither hostile nor welcoming. "I have to admit I'm curious why you're here." "I came to talk about Helena." The name hit its target like a physical blow. Richard's face went through a series of complicated emotions before settling on something that might have been pain. "How do you know that name?" "Mrs. Martinez used to be a nurse at St. David's. She remembers a young couple barely out of college who spent 3 months in the oncology waiting room. She remembers you sleeping in chairs and wearing the same clothes for days and holding your wife's hand through every treatment." Richard's composure cracked visibly. "Mrs. Martinez. She said Helena was beautiful. Said you two looked at each other like you'd invented love." Daniel stepped into the office, noting the way Richard moved aside automatically. "She also said Helena died because the insurance company wouldn't approve an experimental treatment, said it cost $12,000 you didn't have." $12,347. Richard's voice came out hoarse. "I remember the exact amount." The office was a temple to success. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Austin, furniture that cost more than most people's cars, awards and photographs documenting decades of business triumph. But there were no pictures of Sophia, Daniel noticed. No family photos, no personal touches that might suggest the man behind the empire had anything resembling a private life. "You built all this for her," Daniel said. It wasn't a question. "I built it so Sophia would never face what Helena faced, so she'd never have to choose between bankruptcy and death, never have to watch someone she loved suffer because money was more important than medicine." Richard moved to the windows, staring down at the city he'd conquered. "So she'd never have to feel helpless the way I felt helpless. But you can't protect her from everything. I can protect her from poverty. I can protect her from the kind of desperation that makes people do terrible things. I can make sure she never has to depend on charity or the kindness of strangers or the whims of insurance companies that see human lives as line items on spreadsheets." Daniel thought of Maya's hospital bills, of the credit card Sophia had produced without hesitation, of the way money had solved in seconds what would have taken him years to resolve. What if the thing you're trying to protect her from is the thing she needs most? Richard turned from the windows, his expression sharp. "Excuse me? What if she needs to know she can survive without your money? What if she needs to discover her own strength, her own resourcefulness, her own ability to build something meaningful from nothing?" Daniel felt his way through the argument, understanding it himself as he spoke. What if by protecting her from struggle, you're protecting her from growth? That's a luxury philosophy, Mr. Carter. Easy to romanticize poverty when you've never watched it kill someone you love. I have watched it kill someone I love. The admission came out raw, unplanned. My wife Sarah died because we couldn't afford proper mental health treatment. She had postpartum depression after Maya was born, and the sliding scale clinic had a 6-month waiting list, and our insurance wouldn't cover intensive therapy. So she suffered in silence until the silence became too loud to bear. Richard stared at him, recognition flickering in his eyes. She killed herself. She drove into a bridge support at 60 miles an hour because she thought Maya and I would be better off with her life insurance money than with her alive and broken. Daniel felt tears threatening but pushed through them. So yes, I know what poverty can do to people. But I also know what happens when we let fear make all our decisions. The silence stretched between them, filled with the weight of shared grief and the terrible mathematics of love and loss. "What do you want from me?" Richard asked finally. "I want you to meet your daughter, the real woman she's become, not the idea of her you've been protecting all these years." Daniel pulled out his phone and scrolled to a photo he'd taken the previous evening. Sophia at the kitchen table, helping Maya with homework, both of them laughing at something the 7-year-old had written. Look at her face. Really, look at it. Richard took the phone with reluctant hands, studying the image with the intensity of someone seeing a ghost. She looks happy. She looks happy. Daniel reclaimed his phone, noting the way Richard's hands lingered in the space where it had been. When's the last time you saw her look like that? I don't remember. The admission came out broken, defeated. She's been living in a 1,200-square-foot trailer for 3 weeks, working at a diner for $7.25 an hour plus tips, sleeping on a couch that's older than she is, and she's happier than she's ever been in her life. Daniel leaned forward in his chair, willing the older man to understand. Not because poverty is romantic or noble or pure, but because she's finally free to discover who she is when she's not being managed and protected and controlled. And what happens when the novelty wears off? When she gets sick and can't afford treatment? When Maya needs something you can't provide? When reality crashes into this fantasy you've all been living? Then we figure it out together, like families do. Daniel stood, moving to the windows to look down at the city sprawling below. You know what Maya told Sophia the other night? She said families are just people who love each other and don't give up even when things get hard. A 7-year-old's definition of family. The only definition that matters. Daniel turned back to face Richard. You want to protect Sophia? Then trust her. Trust that everything you taught her in the first 18 years of her life gave her the tools she needs to build a meaningful life. Trust that your love was strong enough to create a woman who can make good decisions even when they're hard decisions. Richard was quiet for a long time, staring at the city below as if it might provide answers to questions he'd been avoiding for years. Marcus Blackwood's company employs 4,000 people, he said eventually. If the wedding doesn't happen, if the merger falls through, those jobs disappear. Then help him find another way. Use your connections, your resources, your influence. Save those jobs without sacrificing your daughter's happiness. Daniel felt the pieces clicking together in his mind. You have enough power to solve Marcus's problems without making them Sophia's problems. It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. You're just used to solving problems by controlling people instead of helping them. Daniel moved closer, sensing an opening. What would Helena want? If she could see Sophia now, see how happy she is with us, what would she tell you to do? The question hit like a lightning strike. Richard's face crumpled, and for a moment he looked like the young man Mrs. Martinez remembered, desperate, exhausted, but still capable of love. She'd want Sophia to be happy, he whispered. Then let her be happy. With a plumber who lives in a trailer park? With a man who loves her enough to walk into your office and risk everything to ask for your blessing? Daniel felt the truth of it settle in his chest like a stone. With a little girl who draws pictures of their family and includes Sophia in everyone, with neighbors who look out for each other and friends who show up when things get hard. Richard was crying now, silent tears that spoke to decades of accumulated grief and loneliness and the terrible weight of trying to love someone by controlling them. I don't know how to let go, he admitted. You start by trusting that you raised her right. You start by believing that your love was strong enough to give her what she needs to be happy, even if happiness doesn't look like what you expected. Daniel pulled out his phone again, scrolling to another photo. Look at this. The image showed Maya asleep between Daniel and Sophia on the trailer's small couch, all three of them tangled together like puzzle pieces that had finally found their proper places. That's what love looks like, Daniel said quietly. Not the love that protects and manages and controls, but the love that shows up and stays and chooses to be present even when things are messy and imperfect and uncertain. Richard stared at the photo for a long time, his shoulders shaking with suppressed sobs. "I miss her so much," he finally said. "Helena. Every day for 25 years. I miss her so much I can barely breathe." "I know. I miss Sarah the same way." Daniel sat back down, leaning forward to close the distance between them. But missing them doesn't mean we have to live in fear of losing everyone else. It means we have to love harder, trust deeper, and believe that the people we love are strong enough to choose their own happiness. The conversation continued for another hour. Two men who had lost their wives finding common ground in their love for the children left behind. When Daniel finally left Wellington Tower, he carried with him something he hadn't expected to find. Not victory exactly, but hope. Richard Wellington wasn't the monster Daniel had imagined. He was just a broken man who had confused protection with love, control with caring, and wealth with worth. But broken could be healed, given time and patience and the right kind of pressure applied in the right places. As the elevator descended through 43 stories of accumulated power, Daniel felt lighter than he had in weeks. He'd planted seeds in fertile ground, watered them with truth, and seasoned them with understanding. Now all he could do was wait to see what would grow. The city spread out below him as he walked back to his truck, Austin going about its business under the Texas sun. Somewhere in that urban sprawl, Sophia was serving coffee and eggs to strangers who didn't know they were being waited on by a woman worth more than their annual salaries. Somewhere, Maya was sitting in a classroom, probably drawing another picture of their unconventional family. And somewhere, in a tower built from grief and determination, a billionaire was staring at photos of his daughter's happiness and learning that love sometimes meant letting go. Daniel drove home through traffic that seemed lighter, under skies that seemed bluer, toward a future that suddenly seemed possible again.